Welcome to the 700 Club, a major setback for the pro-life movement in Kansas. Voters rejected a proposed amendment declaring that the state constitution does not grant the right to an abortion.
Both sides of the abortion divide poured millions of dollars into their campaigns. The outcome raises concerns that Kansas could become the abortion capital of the country. Heather Sells reports.
Pro-life Kansans had hoped voters would approve a proposed constitutional amendment overriding a 2019 state Supreme Court decision. That decision declared abortion a fundamental right.
This is really about Kansans taking back their constitution, taking back their ability to place even the most basic restrictions on the abortion industry.
Former Kansas Governor and Senator Sam Brownback said the state's high court ruling was a mistake.
This Kansas Supreme Court has determined that there's a right to an abortion in the Kansas Constitution, and it's not there.
Both sides invested heavily in this vote, pouring more than $14 million into their campaigns. The nation watched closely as well, as the vote marked the first opportunity for a state to weigh in on abortion since the Supreme Court's ruling in June. Going into Tuesday, Brownback and other pro-life Kansans had worried that a loss could turn their state into an abortion haven.
Abortion is just such a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the child, and it's a tragedy for the mother.
Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, abortion-minded women have flocked to Kansas, as neighboring states like Missouri and Oklahoma have banned it. Kansas currently allows most abortions until the 22nd week of pregnancy. Pro-life advocates had hoped that passage of the amendment would allow state lawmakers to pass abortion restrictions.
We haven't been able to pass a pro-life law in Kansas since 2018 because of what our Supreme Court did. Our legislature has little to no ability to place even the most basic regulations.
Other states are also poised to vote on abortion this year. Kentucky will try to add similar language to its state constitution. Voters in Michigan and Vermont will also consider abortion rights legislation. Gordon.
Well, Heather, I've got to ask, what's next for the Kansas pro-life community?
Right. I think there's some surprise because Kansas is really known as being pro-life. The vote was 59-41. They are saying that there was misinformation from the radical left out there about harm to women. So that could have impacted this. But, yeah, I think it's a moment of pause for them. I will also note national pro-life leader and thinker Charlie Camosi said this on Twitter. He said this could perhaps be turned into a good thing if the pro-life movement wakes up. If you were lulled into a false sense of security post-obs, that is officially over now. So perhaps this really just indicates what's at stake, and it's hand-to-hand combat in the states.
Well, how does this defeat impact that debate, the debate over abortion restrictions in other states? What's your prediction going forward?
I think it's a short term, it's a boost for those who support abortion, but I think it's a wake-up call for the pro-life movement. There's votes ahead, and there's a lot of activity in the states right now, and so I think you're going to see that. I also think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned from Kansas, and one instance, Charlie Camosi again says that model legislation should make absolutely clear that physicians will do whatever is necessary to save a mother's life. So I think care and concern for women has to be paramount in the pro-life movement going forward.
Well, the federal government is now stepping into the state battle. The Justice Department sued Idaho over its new abortion law, claiming it violates federal law. What's the basis of the claim?
Right, so very interesting here. This is the first time the Department of Justice has stepped into the fight. There were 13 states that passed trigger laws, pro-life laws that went into effect right after the court overturned Roe v. Wade, and Idaho was one of them. And in essence, the prosecutors are saying that the Idaho law forces doctors to violate a federal law. That's the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which requires anyone coming into a medical facility to be stabilized. But the Idaho law has exceptions allowing for abortions to be performed to save the life of the mother. So very interesting legal strategy here, and we'll see if the Department of Justice is successful.
All right. Well, Heather, thanks for the report. Thanks for the analysis. Let me remind Christians that from the beginning of Christianity, you go back to this wonderful book called the Didact, which translates from Greek, the teaching. And it was the teaching of the early church. Some thought it should have been included in the New Testament, but others said, no, this is just instruction for new believers. And in it, it spells out very clearly that Christians do not practice exposing their children, so they don't practice infanticide, and they don't practice abortion. It may be news to you, but abortion was available 2,000 years ago. They knew of certain plants that would cause miscarriages, and Christians said, no, we don't do that. We believe in life. Wouldn't it be better to have a culture where we celebrate motherhood? We encourage mothers to give birth to their children. We support them all the way along. When you look at the difficulty most mothers have in raising their children, the cost of it, everything that they have to give up, wouldn't it be great to say, yes, we stand beside you. We want to help you in your time. Well, in other news, the results are in for most of the GOP primary races, although one crucial state is still counting votes. Ephraim Graham has more of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, two important primary races to tell you about in the battles for Republican gubernatorial nominations. In Michigan, businesswoman and conservative commentator Tudor Dixon won the nomination. She was endorsed by former President Donald Trump. Dixon is pro-life, and she blasted Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer as the queen of lockdowns for her COVID restrictions. Turning now to Arizona, the day began with no clear winner. Trump endorsed former TV news anchor Kari Lake, and she had a slight lead over Karen Taylor Robson, who was backed by former Vice President Mike Pence. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi left Taiwan today. Her visit triggered an angry response from China, the communist government calling it a serious violation of the One China principle. Shortly after her plane landed Tuesday, China announced several days of live-fire military exercises in airspace and waters surrounding the island. Taiwan claims some of the drills could spill over into its territorial waters and threaten civilian shipping. In a news conference with Taiwan's president, Pelosi emphasized America's stance with them in the face of Chinese aggression.
It's really important for the message to be clear that in the Congress, House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans are committed to the security of Taiwan in order to have Taiwan be able to most effectively defend themselves.
The Biden administration and Republican members of Congress are supporting the speaker's visit. She continues her Asia tour with stops in South Korea and Japan. Turning now to Israel, 20 years ago, a suicide bomber killed 9 people in an attack at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. The accomplices in that attack just got a pay raise, thanks to a Palestinian policy known as pay to slay. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, Israel is cracking down on this practice of paying terrorists and their families.
The bombing took place at the Frank Sinatra cafeteria at Hebrew University on July 31st, 2002. It came in the middle of what was called the Second Intifada, a 4-year-long terror campaign against Israelis. The IDF arrested those responsible, some who have been in prison for 20 years.
Here we're talking about 9 people murdered, over 80 injured. 5 of those murdered were actually American citizens. And now the PA is literally paying additional rewards to those terrorists.
Maurice Hirsch of the Palestinian Media Watch explains the Palestinian Authority law, which standardizes payments to terrorists.
And sets a pay scale which goes up, where the salary goes up every period of time on an automatic basis. So one of those increments is when you have served 20 years in jail, you then get a 14 and a bit % pay rise, and your salary goes up.
Israel also passed its own anti-terror law in 2018. That reduces the amount of tax revenue they return to the PA. That's equal to the money the Palestinian Authority pays terrorists in jail. Just days ago, they stopped payment of more than $170 million to the PA. But the process of paying money to terrorists, known as pay to slay, is deeply embedded in the Palestinian Authority.
I cannot impress upon you how deeply suited and rooted this entire policy is. If, as Mahmoud Abbas has repeatedly said, if there's only 1 penny left in the coffers of the Palestinian Authority, he will pay it to terrorists.
4 years ago, the U.S. Congress passed the Taylor Force Act to stop U.S. aid to the Palestinians from going to pay terrorists.
The Palestinian Authority just don't care. While they constantly say that America is failing the Palestinians by not providing them with aid, really all they have to do is stop paying terrorists, stop rewarding the murderers of American citizens, and they'll be able to get the money.
Hirsch says the world needs to wake up to how the PA keeps alive this perpetuation of terrorism.
Probably the most poisonous idea affecting peace between Israelis and Palestinians at the moment is the payment of these rewards to terrorists. The international community must get together, must implore the Palestinian Authority to abolish this policy and condition all aid to the PA on abolishing this policy.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
We've long reported on the pay-to-slay policy, still quite disturbing, Gordon.
And it's still active. The Taylor Force Act is in force and in effect, but they figured out ways to get around it, to continue to funnel money to the Palestinian Authority and to UNRWA. The fundamental ideology hasn't changed. They want to reward their martyrs. They call them the Shaheed. They view them as heroes. They put statues in their square. They name streets after them. It is absolutely horrific how they reward people based on the number of Israelis they are able to kill. This has to stop. If you're looking for peace, if you're just stop this and stop the payments. It's high time we say to the Palestinian Authority, no more. The current administration seems to have some kind of dream that you can reinvigorate peace talks, you can talk about a two-state solution, you can talk about returning to the 1967 borders, but all of that is living in some kind of fantasy world because you're ignoring the underlying ideology. And it really doesn't matter who's in charge of the Palestinian Authority, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or the PLO. All of these groups want to wipe out Israel. It's a fundamental ideology. They don't believe in a two-state solution. They want Israel to go away. We should take them at their word.